Hello and welcome to another Digital Dimensions CADcast. My name is Maurice Cherian. Today I'm going to be going over how to fix missing and broken external references. We'll get started with the slides. First, the agenda. I'll talk a little bit about creating and what is an external reference, external references identification, reasons why you want to remove some of these external references, some of the troubleshooting techniques and ways you can actually remove these external references, go over the references command, and finally going over prevention of external references. So external references can be created in several ways. An external reference usually is a link to a file outside of the one you're working on. A lot of times it's a part that has links back to an assembly, or in the case of an inserted part, it's a link back to another part. Lots of different ways to create external references using the hole wizard and hole series holes and other assembly features creates an external reference. Insert part we just mentioned. Mirroring parts also creates external references. And then one of the most common ones is when you do in-context editing of a part or create a virtual part using the convert entities and offset entity command in a sketch. Other things like end conditions, sketch planes, and dimensions, if you use external surfaces and edges, that will create external references while you're working in an assembly too. Some of these external references are easy to recognize, others are not. External references aren't all bad, it's just usually when they're missing, broken, or renamed links that SOLIDWORKS can't find, that's when you usually have to fix these things. The first thing I'll go into is identifying external references. The dash with the right arrow signifies external references or external references present. If you see that dash with the arrow and a question mark, that means the external reference is out of context, which means the files are not in RAM that it's looking for. They're not in memory, so that's where that question mark will show up. An asterisk means that the external reference is locked. An X means it's been broken. The list external reference command will let you lock or break an external reference. Lock is a temporary unlinking of the external reference. Break is a permanent break from the external reference and cannot be restored. So now I'll go into an assembly and show you some of these identifying features and symbols to help you understand where external references are in an assembly. So this assembly is a simple assembly, but it does have a nice example of an external reference. This part was created originally in context of the assembly, this gasket part. Now, one way to quickly identify external references, if you expand out the tree here, you'll see these dashes with the right arrows. That means there's external references either in the feature, or if you expand it out, you might see that dash in the sketch. So some of these have the sketches have an external reference, or the feature does. So that's one way to identify it. Another way is one way that a lot of people don't know about is there's this thing called holders or update holders. You can show the update holders, and now they'll actually show, you can actually highlight them, and you'll see these what they call holders, and these are telling SOLIDWORKS that there are some links to the assembly with respect to this gasket part here. So again, that was show update holders, or you can hide them. Now usually to see those external references, I usually go into the file and just open it up directly, so you can see again those symbols showing the external references. And then the command that lets you break them is this list external references. If you do not see this, then that means there is an external reference, and when you click on it, you can see here's break and lock. Lock is a temporary suppression of the update ability, so this locks the update ability temporarily. This permanently breaks that updating by the assembly, forcing down the changes down to the part. So this is a break, this is a temporary block. The break cannot be reconnected, so that's a one-time shot. So a lot of times people just temporarily lock it. Breaking the external reference does not remove all the external references completely from the part. We'll go into that in a few minutes. One of the things that was added for 2013 is you can now, when you go into list external references, you can see them here, and there is a break all. This will break all the external references in the assembly with one click. So be careful, this one you cannot reverse. Let's go back to the slides now. Now that we've showed you some of the identifying symbols for external references, why do you need to sometimes remove external references? A lot of times external references work great and they do what you want it to do. You update the assembly, it updates the part. But there are times where you have to remove an external reference. So what are some of the reasons why you would remove an external reference? Well, the original reference, the original files that were referenced sometimes have been renamed, they're missing, or some people don't have access to them now, or they never had access to them. Another scenario is where you want to reuse a part in a different assembly, and you don't want the original assembly to affect the part and have unwanted changes, so you want to make the part standalone. And finally, the last case is some of the PDM systems do not allow external references to be checked in at the same time. They only want to check in one single file. So when you troubleshoot some of these missing or broken external references, one of the most helpful tools is the one on the top of the list here, File, Find References. That'll tell you what's linked. In this case, it'll tell you if the file is found or not. It'll tell you the location and the name of it. The List External Reference command that I already showed once will let you lock or break the external references. But again, the breaking of the external reference does not remove the external reference. So that's something that is a little confusing for some people. And I'll show that here in one of the examples. While you're in a sketch, you can use display/delete relations to show all the external references in a sketch. And the one I just showed a few minutes ago on the assembly was the show update holders. That will show any of the external references on the bottom of the assembly feature tree, which is definitely a handy utility too. So one thing that people get confused about is when you fix regular rebuild errors and warnings, you work from the top down. When you remove external references, you want to work from the bottom up. One reason is to avoid rebuild errors and also to maintain the origin of your part. Your origin could move around if you start from the top down. Now I'll go back to SOLIDWORKS and show you some of these troubleshooting techniques and ways to remove some of those bad external references. So this gasket here was created in context of this assembly. I'm going to go ahead and open up one that does have a broken link or broken external reference. So this part looks very similar to the one we just had open. How do I know if there's something wrong or not? I can see the external references. This time I have a question mark. So people that use external references usually go over to this command and say, okay, here's edit in context. Now the problem is now it says unable to locate it. So now it can't find that. Usually the scenario is it's broken, renamed, or missing. So now what do? Well, I'll just get out of that dialog box, and now we can't find those files. The other way you can verify this too is File, Find References, and now you can see that now it's looking for this mates assembly and it can't find it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove these links. Now one way you can remove them is you can right click, you can go List External References, and I can hit the break button. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and break them for the whole part. But one thing you want to understand is even if I break them, now you see the X here, and that broke them for all of the references in this model now. So that was a quick fix, but it didn't completely fix it. So if I go to File, Find References, it still has that link there. So now to officially remove everything, start from the bottom up, not top down, bottom up, and I'm going to go ahead and edit the sketch first. We'll start with the sketch. I'll go to a hidden line visible display so you can see it. So it has a bunch of, in this case, on-edge relationships. They were created from the convert entities command. A good technique to show this is go to display, delete relations, And now here is, you can see all the relations. Here's external references. Some people use this to show dangling references. So here's external. So I can just go ahead and say delete all. Now the trick is, do not remove or do not move these points, because now this sketch is not fully defined. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a couple equal relationships, add a couple symmetric relationships, and so I'll add a couple center lines in here. And what I recommend is to put in the critical dimensions before we use the fully defined sketch function. So for example, so I'll make those symmetric. And so I'll add some symmetry here. So make them all symmetric. I'll turn back on the sketch relation so you can see that. And now I'm going to use this command called fully defined sketch. It's only in one place. You have to hit the drop down for display delete relations. I'm going to use fully defined sketch. It has 3 different types of schemes. You can do chain, baseline, and ordinate. I'm going to use the default baseline. I'm going to use the origin. I'm going to put the dimensions below and to the left. How do you make this button work? Go ahead and hit calculate. And now it'll put the dimensions in. It'll put the relationships that I didn't put in already in here. So it's a quick way to line this up. And if you didn't like the dimensioning scheme here, you can always go in here and change what you don't want to. Now it's back to being underdefined. You can always put in the dimensions exactly the way you want. So you don't have to be bullied by the fully defined sketch. You can remove a couple and put them back in. But for more complicated sketch, it's a very handy tool. So this is fully defined. I'm going to go ahead and get out of that sketch. And now I'll shade this back up again. You can see now, that first feature on the bottom of the list here doesn't have the X or that external reference anymore. So that first feature is totally separated. But now we still have the original outline of the part that still has the external reference. So we work our way up. And I'm going to go ahead and say edit this sketch. And now I'm going to do the same steps again. I'm going to go to display delete relations. I'm going to go to the external list here, delete them all. And now again, be careful not to move the geometry. I'll put a couple center lines in. And here again, we can put equal relationships and symmetric relationships. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and use the fully defined sketch button. And again, do I want them below, to the left for the dimensions? I'll hit calculate here. And now it's fully defined. And again, I can switch these dimensions around if I don't like them. So this is a fully defined sketch, and that button was shown up under display delete relations. Once it's fully defined here, that drop down only has 2 in here, not the fully defined sketch. So it only shows up when it's not fully defined. I'll close out of here. Now the last step, and I set this up on purpose because this is a gotcha, is the thickness. So I fixed the sketch, but I still have an external reference here at the feature level. So why is that? Because someone might have used an up to surface or offset from surface. In this case, an up to surface was used to create that final external reference here. So a face on the assembly was used to create it. So what I recommend is, before you fix that, go to measure and make sure you measure the faces or measure the part here. And you can see it's 5 millimeters here, or you can just select an edge and you can see very quickly it tells me it's 5 millimeters. So now the reason why I did that is because now I'm going to go to edit the feature, and now all of a sudden you lose your thickness and you might not have remembered, or you might not have made the part. So before I go into that, I do the measurement. So now I'm going to change it, because now you can see it wants to make it 10 with the blind depth. I'm going to change it back to 5. And now with that final step, the external reference is gone. How do I know? The list external reference button is gone for both of them, and they always double check. The for sure verification is to go to File, Find References, and now you can see that reference is gone. So now this is a completely standalone part with no external references, and it is fully defined, and you can always type in SK here and look for minus signs, and those dashes are now gone. So now we fix the part, and now let's go back to the slides. So to review the troubleshooting, make sure you're looking for that symbol, remove the external reference from the sketch, and then see if the feature has an external reference, and then make sure you're looking at that File, Find Reference command. So the last one on this slide is the insert part. So when you insert a part into another part, external references can be broken, but they cannot be completely removed. So this is something I'm going to show you. I will show you a way to work around that limitation. So let's go back to SOLIDWORKS again. So this is a part that has a bad external reference. In this case, it was a part inserted into another part. So if I go back to editing context, can't find it. If you try to browse for it, in this case, it's not on this computer. So now you have a bad external reference. So now what you can do is you can, if you absolutely had to get rid of this reference, you go in here to list external references, you hit break, you can break it, but going to find references, it doesn't completely remove it. So how do you actually get rid of this? And you can see in here it does have some of the features as a body, it has some of the planes and sketches. I'll show you another technique to get all of the features over to here. So now how do I fix this? I go to File, Save As. I'm going to say Save as Copy. And now I'm going to save it. I usually prefer a Parasolid, but you can use Parasolid, IGES, or Step. So I'll go ahead and say Parasolid, and I'll save it. Now I'm going to open it up. I'll run the import diagnostics on it, make sure everything's okay. And I'll skip the feature recognition. So here's that file again. I just brought it in from the Parasolid. And now if I go to Find References, now you can see that other file is now gone. So now when I save this, the last step is to save this part with the SOLIDPRT, SOLIDWORKS extension. And now that has been removed. So that's how you can remove it. IGES or Step or Parasolid, export it out and import it back in again. Let's go back to the slides. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the References command. Now the References button is available when you are using the File Open dialog box. It cannot be used when you're using the Recently Open list drop-down. You can use it to rename references that SOLIDWORKS can't find. So one of the other things I'll show here is that you can reuse a detailed drawing and not have to recreate one from scratch if you have a similar part that you want to make a drawing for also. So let me go ahead and go back to SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to open up a file, and this hanger-1 drawing is referencing hanger-1 here. So now let's say it was renamed and SOLIDWORKS is not going to like that I renamed it. So I'll go ahead and try to open it up, and it says, hey, you can't find it. Can you help me find the file? And so if you don't know where it's at or it's missing or lost, you get these X's. So some of you might have experienced this before. So how do you fix that? Since I just broke it, I'll go to File, Open, and now what you do is you use the Open dialog box. So now I'm going to pick the same drawing again. I don't double click and I don't hit Open. What I do is I go to References, and now I'm going to use this button. You can change the name or change the location or change both. I'll click on Hanger 1, and now I'm going to pick that one I just renamed. And now I'll say OK. And you can see how it shows it in green here. That means it signifies a change. That means it's working correctly. So I'll go ahead and say Open. I'll say OK. And now I can double click on it or hit the Open command. And now the drawing comes up. It's going to be OK. It's happy. It found the file. Everything's OK. And now if I go to Find References, now you can see it's using the rename part. Now what you want to do, the last step is to save this change, is go over here and save the file, and now it's going to save that updated link. Now this part has 3 holes here on each side here, and so I'm going to use this very similar part that has a slot cut out on both sides, and I don't want to have to recreate the drawing from scratch. So how do I do that? I'll do the same steps. I'm going to go File, Open. In this case, I'll go back to that same location, and here's that drawing again, but now I'm going to use this Hanger 2 part. So the Hanger 2 has a slot cut out instead of those 6 holes. It has 2 slots. So again, I use the Reference button and the References button, and I double click, and this time I'm going to go ahead and select Hanger 2. And now again, you'll see it turn green, and you can change directory and name or both. I'm going to say OK here, and now I can double click on the drawing or hit Open. And now what it's going to do is now it's going to change the part over and switch the reference for me. But it does have some questions for me. SOLIDWORKS wants to know, hey, there's some relationships or dimensions and things that aren't there between these parts. Not everything is common. So what do you want to do? Do you want to delete these dangling items, or do you want to leave them in there? I'll go ahead and leave them in there so you can see the color that they turn. They turn kind of a goldish, yellowish color. I'm going to say OK. And now I left them in here. I'll zoom in real quick. And you can see that this dimension was for one of the holes. I'll go ahead and remove that. I can window around some of these center marks that are now no longer valid. So that's most of the ones that were wrong or missing or dangling. So I'll go ahead and put in a dimension. So I'll put in that dimension. I'll go into annotations. I'll quickly add a couple center marks here. And so you can see it brought in the drawing using the new part. All the dangling entities are gone, and I very quickly fixed it, and now I didn't have to recreate the drawing from scratch. It has the new part in here. It still says it's Hanger -1 on the drawing. So the last step, and this is what sometimes people forget to do, is you go File, Save As, and now you want to lock it in. I'm going to say Save As Copy. I'm going to pick Hanger 2, and now this will save it with those new references here. So now it's been saved, and now I'll close this one out. I won't save this one. Don't save this one. I'll go back over and open up the new Hanger 2 drawing, and now this one has the new changes here. You can see the slots, and then go to File, Find References, and you can see now it's a separate file with a link to Hanger 2 for the part. So this is a big time saver. You do not have to recreate a drawing from scratch if you have a similar part that you want to make a drawing of. So the last thing to talk about is prevention of unwanted external references. So I made that gasket part in that assembly, and it was made in context of the assembly. They call it a virtual part or in context part. There's a way to prevent those external references being created in the first place. So I'll show that to you right now in SOLIDWORKS. So here's that assembly again. So this gasket, how was this gasket created? It was created by using insert component new part or insert component new part from the drop down list. So I pick a face to create a new sketch in my new part, and now here's how you can create this. Here's the Convert Entities button. So I'm in a sketch, and here's this big fat No External Reference button. So I can use that. I can still trace over geometry, but it will not create the external references. It'll just make an underdefined sketch in here. So I'll use Convert Entities, and a shortcut is I can pick the face again. If you hold down Control and pick one of the edges, use Convert Entities again, and it will create the geometry. Now it's blue. I'll change over to a hidden line removed. You can see it's blue. It's a blue sketch, not black. And so now I can go ahead and extrude that. And when I extrude this, I don't give it an up to surface or offset from surface end condition. I just give it a blind depth. And so let's go ahead and open this up in its own part. So now there's no dashes with the right arrow, no external references, but now I have an underdefined sketch. So you want to go in there and follow up and put the dimensions and relations in there. But now you have a part that's standalone, that's not tied to the original assembly. So again, here's that No External Reference button. Let's go back to the slides. The very last thing to show you is when you insert a part into another part, you can use this command break link to original part to avoid creating unwanted external references that way too. I'll go back to SOLIDWORKS now. I'm going to create a new part, and I'm going to insert another part into this part. So where's that command at? It's insert part. So you got to bring in an external file. And so in this case, I'll bring in this this multi-body part. And this multi-body part has a lot of features. It has, in this case, over 70 features. Now before I hit this green checkbox to line it up with the origin of the new part here, is I want to go down to this link command, and you have a one-time chance with this. Here's break link to original part. This is how you can prevent the external references from being created. This is almost like a copy features command. So I check that. I'll just go ahead and place it right on top of the origin of the new part. I'll say OK. And now what it's going to do, and it's going to take a few seconds because it's basically transferring all those features over. It really is copying over the features over into this part. It's a very powerful feature because now those features truly do stand alone. It's like I just copied all the features from the other part. And when it's done, how I can verify that is I'll expand out this folder, and you can see now there's over 70 features, and they're all features that you can modify and change like you normally would. If you go over to Tools, Feature Statistics, you can now see there's 76 features in here. And also, if I go to File, Find References, just to double check, you can see there's no ties to that original part file. That's going to do it for today's CADcast. Thanks for watching. Please visit our website at ddicad.com for more CADcasts and tech tips. Thanks again.